Hello, welcome back to Far Horizons Gaming. My name is Ben, and today we're going to continue on with Suzerain. So last time out, we had an international interview, we had a military parade, and also went to dinner with Lilius. So let's go and pick it up here. So I went ahead and clicked to the next churn. So this churn is called Will of the States. So let's check out the news here. Geopolitico. World leaders to gather at Alliance of Nations. Calling for session on the current affairs, world leaders will be gathering at Alliance of Nations next week. Main highlights from the upcoming agenda were announced, and as expected, they'll be around the current issues in Eastern Maricopa. In addition to the member states from the region, President Walker and Chairman Millenniev will be delivering their speeches at the Assembly. All eyes will turn to Constantium Kairout, as historic session will be taking place in the Alliance of Nations headquarters. Cool. Alright, and I think Whole Sword is the only thing. Yep, so let's head to Whole Sword. Alright, got one more report on the schedule for the Alliance of Nations session. We have received the schedule for the upcoming Alliance of Nations session. According to the dates outlined, Swordland 1 is being prepared for the flight to Constantium Kairout. Minister of Foreign Affairs David Vichy will be attending the session as well as accompanying Mr. President on the flight. Alright, well in that case, let's go ahead and head to the Alliance of Nations. I, David Vichy, and the rest of the Swordlish delegation to the Alliance of Nations arrived in Kairout. The local police escorted us to the Alliance's headquarters in downtown Constantium, immediately recognizable by its gleaming dome. On entering the building, we were met with a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the third floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and took our designated seats. David sat next to me. All of the world's most powerful people in one gleaming dome. It's amazing how someone has managed to fill a room with people that absolutely loathe each other. It is truly astounding. Humanity's come far. How are you feeling, Anton? Being the president must have taken a toll on you and the family. It comes with the job. I and Monica already came to terms with the risk after the inauguration ball. It is tough to be the president, making harsh decisions, dealing with the consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time's been a cruel mistress. For what it's worth, I appreciate all the advice you've given me. Thank you, Anton. From the distance, you can see the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session's about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's going to be a long day. Mr. Nines opened the session with a short speech and called the first speaker to the floor. It is my great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lesbia to address the Assembly. Patricio Alvarez stood and walked up to the podium as the assembly applauded. Mr. President, it is my pleasure to return to this podium. David leaned in and spoke in a low voice. Let's see how crazy this year's session will get. I'm surprised he isn't drunk. David chuckled. I mean, he could be drunk, just not, like, blackout drunk just yet. Alright. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was of encouragement and support to this organization and the vital role it plays. Of all the challenges Eastern Maricopa and the whole world has faced since then, one has grown larger and more important than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table of Foxland. I saw Emmerich Hagel pounding his fists on his table in protest. Look at that guy, he's an embarrassment. David nodded. Today, the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever. The CSP, under the leadership of United Katana, has been fueling Falkland's military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in Eastern Maricopa. The world cannot turn a blind eye to the increasing naval presence of Falkland in the Marking Sea. We hereby call for the immediate withdrawal of all naval vessels with any offensive capability from international waters. A lot of noise came from the assembly hall in response. Most of the Western Maricopa delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Let us not also forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist leanings, a state that waged war against its own citizens, Valen. That's a bunch of horse shit. Valen isn't even socialist. Yeah, strictly speaking, the Small X Party is called the Basic Nationalist Purity of Nearest Socialism. I mean, okay, that's fair, but, they're also National Socialists, so they're Nazis? That's good. The purge of the minorities in the country was again largely ignored by the international community. I would go as far as to call it genocide. Swordland violated our past treaties and gave support to this mass group of their armed forces, deploying them close to our borders. Lesbia was affected not only by the large wave of refugees coming from Valen, but by the subsequent government seizure of all of our companies that were active in the country. The resources taken from these companies are being practically sold to Swordland. We hereby call the member states to take action against Valen and its Swordlish caretakers. Thank you. I didn't react to his speech. He walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Mercopan delegates. President Nines waited for the noise to calm down and invited the next speaker, the president of Valen, Victor Smolak. Smolak stood up. As he walked past Patricio Alvarez, she brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arms. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with the microphone for a few seconds. Then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised the height of it. And look at all those theatrics. Yep, that's him. Victor turned to President Nines and bowed slightly. Mr. President. He then turned back at us and stared out into the hall for a few seconds. Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of these challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gather here in Kairut. And what do? They make threats, promote hate, and spread lies. This is the alliance of nations we all want. Where is the cooperation and friendship? Where is the unity? I want to remind you of the wars that the West has fought on our soil, the foreign troops who occupied our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you how they stole the oil from our sacred soil, and they did not know when to stop. The ATO soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose only purpose is to create terror inside our country. So, fellow delegates, don't you dare speak about the Valen before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war, before you acknowledge your own dark past. Yeah, he's not entirely wrong. Yeah, it's true that West Paris had their hands in Valen's civil war, but it does justify the operation. Sorry, your idea might take and deal with him. As is made well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Valen civil war, Gazia made a deal with United Cantona, where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops along with the removal of half of our army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone and facing the genocidal British Freedom Front, which the ATO funds together with Rumberg. I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference. He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth. I have clear evidence of direct aid from Rumberg to the British Freedom Front. They've smuggled tons of K-74s in Valen. They smuggled in their spies, smuggled in mercenary commanders. He's finally talking about it. We're not the only ones now. So it seems. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the investigative affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect this organization to do its task and investigate properly, instead of leaving Valen behind, as they have always done. Coming back to the claims of a lesbian representative, first, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the basic forces, no so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation is limited only to the militant BFF, not the Bloods in general. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of BFF, and that your oil companies aided the militants during the operation. Fourth, as a state, we only took what was ours. The companies delegates spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were brought to Valen by force. And lastly, Valen has no caretaker. Valen only has friends whom it cooperates with. He looked at me. Then he looked at the Arcasian delegates and the lesbians seated next to them, and enemies who want to keep it down. Know that Valen will no longer recognize the right of any other country to determine what type of weapons we are permitted to possess or what type of policies we follow within our borders. Valen stands stronger and more united than ever. Our people have spoken. The enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now I ask every single delegate here to read our report on the connections of the West with the armed militants in Eastern Rakopa. And I ask the Alliance of Nations to do what is right. Valen only wants peace. Our people want peace. They are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. Their proclamation is, Free Valen or death. The assembly roared, with particularly loud applause coming from the seats of Rican nations. He seems to be popular with Rika, doesn't he? Well, he played the victim here pretty strongly, and his anti-imperial stance definitely earned him sympathy with Ricans. Most of that continent is still not achieved stability after gaining their independence from the colonial suzerains. And it's easy to forget that it's only been a few years since the revolutions. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. He saluted the Rican delegates as he passed them. Next, President Nines invited Martin Van Horten to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning and clenching his fists. I could almost see his jaw trembling. Seems like Martin's not in the mood. Yeah, can you blame him? His navy's being harassed by Foxen every day now. Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly and friends, it is an honor to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances. Once again, the CSP nations, and in particular Foxen, have shown us what they are willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must first thank the delegates from Solent for being brave enough to recognize our homeland when the rest of the world left us alone. We are one of the first countries to propose proper cooperation between Eastern Makopa nations. Yet when we were threatened by Foxanian expansionism, nobody came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voiced his indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I can't keep myself from wondering where he was when our fleets were under attack by the very socialists he spoke about. So here I am, asking for the support of the fellow member states of the Alliance of Nations. Agnolia is under attack by Foxland. A loud banging noise emerged from the table of Foxanian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on the table. Man, those guys need to learn some respect. Yeah, that's for sure. Mr. President, please moderate the assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Emmerich Hagel began shouting curses as Nines repeatedly banged his gavel for order. After a minute of back and forth shouting, the noise settled and Nines allowed Martin to continue. As you all know, our drilling ships, oil tankers, and even fishing vessels have been dissipating in the Marcan Sea, captured or sunk by Foxen. And the Voxanian fleet is patrolling the seas around Hellion with complete disregard to international laws. I call on the Alliance of Nations to find the resolution to this never-ending conflict that Foxen created. We demand the immediate withdrawal of all naval forces from our territorial waters. In the midst of all this conflict, Sodana gave United Cantona docking rights in their largest naval base that currently holds an entire fleet from Cantona. With the access given to them by Sodana, the United Cantona Fox and the United Force is now roaming our seas. Millennialist terror surrounds us on all sides. I call the democratic world to action against the tyranny of millennialism, authoritarianism, militarism, and extremism. The banging noise started again. Hagel stood up and approached the rostrum. You're a Spanish jerk, a lackey of our cause and imperialism. President Nines called for silence and started hitting the gavel. I stood up. Let him speak. What are you so afraid of? You won't even let him finish. You have no right to intervene, nor your place, President Rain. President Nines smacked his gavel in vain as a shouting match broke out in the assembly. Alright, I had to do it. I don't know why. Finally, after a few minutes, the other Voxani delegates convinced Hagel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about this subject. Everything is clear as day. Mr. Hagel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Voxen and their corrupted ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations soon. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Agnolian delegate. The two left the assembly hall. President Nines announced next speaker, Emmerich Hagel. Hagel immediately took his place and spoke in a low, seething tone. Thank you. Buckle up. It's Chancellor's time now. It looks like you're having fun, Mr. President. First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new states from Rica that have joined this organization. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they've more than earned our membership vote. I'm overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our numbers grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolutions to the conflicts that plague us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economies of Makopa raised, pillaged, and exploited the continents of Rica and Sina. Sadly, Voxen was also part of this plunder in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the idea of imperialism. But when our masters found their voice, the old colonial powers and the new financiers turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolutions. They did not want the people to be heard. They are scared of us of showing the possibility of a better path. Of course they don't want to succeed, when we threaten the productivity that runs in the blood and sweat of their working class. And now they've started labeling us the aggressors, yet we all know the Arcasians built military bases all around Makopa. It's the 8th year that first formed the fight against millennialism. He's exaggerating. Do you think so? He's not entirely wrong. Voxen holds the right to protect its territorial waters and trade from threats. Its delegations from Lesbia and Agnolia brought up the Falenko Treaty. Hey, did they? But what were they doing when ATO forces patrolled the Antics Sea? They are silent. And what about Helliland? How about the Vogs being killed by the Agnolia government because they protested against an appointed governor? Agnolia and their allies in Solda have no right to claim they're upholding liberty and democracy. Other nations have no right to intervene in the matters between Agnolia and Voxen. Just as no country in the world has the right to determine what type of naval vessels we use, no country can force us not to defend all seas. If there's conflict the Alliance can resolve, let's start the Akasian base on Ravnos Island. Lesbia has been housing Akasian troops and missiles by our border for years, and other member states even talked about it. I also want the member states to look into the Akasian bases in Lesbia. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interests at heart, they cannot stay silent about what our Agnolian government did in Helliland.
They took away the rights of our people. Perhaps then there can be proper dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willing to overlook such human rights violations. However, the Volksani government is ready as always to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of free people everywhere. He raised his left fist. A revolution, that's called it.
Was that Swordish? Did I catch that right?
He said the revolution will come, yes, but it was in Old Voglish. Very similar to Swordish, right? Some words are even written the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent.
Most of the delegates from Xena, Rika, and Kantan responded with thunderous applause. Hagel shook hands with them as he walked back to his seat. President Nines announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear ladies of the world, just as my fellow Eastern Macopan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our continent, I also have to bring to attention the growing threat to our region, Sodvan. As you know, not long ago, Swedish aircraft with offensive capabilities were spotted inside our borders. A few days later, they shot down one of our planes inside our own airspace. It was practically an act of war. Knowing this, Rumbling will do anything in its power to defend itself and its interests, whether Sodvan is actually planning something or not. Our Swedish neighbours and what they've been doing is very concerning. They took in traitors to give them protection. Their president himself came to power and made a murder and unrest, yet people from his administration have the guts to blame our government for inciting violence. And they expect the world to believe their lies. Can't let her speak about us like that.
Let's first hear her out.
Sodvan is becoming a rogue nation that intervenes in other conflicts, such as the tragic Operation Valen. I hereby invite all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Sodvan. If the Alliance continues to shirk its given duties, you can trust in Romberg to take matters into her own hands. It is also important to point out that Romberg will not stand idly by if more Kantan military are transferred into Eastern Macopa. I hereby condemn both the CSP and Sodvan for allowing United Kantana to set in our region. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Smolak, I'm looking forward to reading your report. I wonder what this so-called evidence is all about. Know that your slander does not work on us. Know that we are ready to die for our freedom. Know that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. Thank you. That was the worst speech I've ever heard. She left the rostrum without getting much applause. Then President Nine spoke my name. Mr. Anton Rain, President of Sordland, I invite you to address the Assembly. David immediately started applauding.
Good luck, Mr. President.
I walked up to the rostrum and took my place at the podium. In front of me were some of the most powerful leaders in the entire world. I looked them in the eyes. Let's see, let's go with this one. The representation of Sordland is pleased to address this assembly. The speakers who have preceded me have expressed their concern about their problems. We, too, are concerned about some of those problems and would like to expand on them. Let's see. Our century is a century of the struggle for freedom, a century of liberation from foreign occupation. Let's try this one. Today, we're confronted by a difficult choice. Our great achievements may either be used for the benefit or to the detriment of mankind. Now, I'd like to address some of the topics mentioned here today. In response to Mr. Alvarez, Valen was left alone in his fight against terror. Sordland took on the responsibility to help them destroy the BFF, a threat to both of our nations. We will continue our cooperation with Valen. I'd also like to respond to Mr. Van Horten. Oh, crap. I don't think that's quite what I meant to do. I wanted to back him up, not yell at him here. Well, crap. Okay, I guess let's go with this. We must first look at his own actions in Hellion, which started this chain of events. Oh, there we go. Okay. Maybe. I guess we'll go with that. In any case, sort of them do whatever it takes to achieve peace in Eastern Maricopa. Okay, well, hopefully I didn't just accidentally screw something up there. Alright, well, whatever. Anyway, I also would like to address the Queen of Rumburg. She talked about some hypothetical threat that our nation poses to Eastern Maricopa, where Rumburg's military has tripled in the last decade. It was Rumburg who shot down our aircraft within our airspace. We only defended our borders. I also have evidence to show to the Assembly. Mr. Smolak was right about the KA-74s. We discovered that many militant groups in Sorlin are being financed or armed by Rumburg. There is another important piece of evidence we have, provided to us by someone close to the Rumburgian government. Mr. Hailstone was branded as a traitor in Rumburg for blowing the whistle on the country's hidden nuclear facilities. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duties. Rumburg and its nuclear facilities must be properly investigated. Thank you for listening to our concerns. I wish to see a resolution from the AN soon. Let's see. We stand and always will stand for the rights of the people of Sorrel and Eastern Maricopa, just as those in other continents. People of Sorrel and I are honored to express their concerns before this noble assembly. Of Mogna Vascore. There was some applause from the assembly. Thank you. I left the podium. I have a feeling I screwed that up, but that's okay. I walked back to my seat. David did not stop applauding until I sat down. How was it? It was not a bad speech, Mr. President. You did well. President Nines announced the next speaker, Dwight Walker, sorry. Mr. President, I first want to congratulate you on your election to this high office. Mr. Secretary, delegates, the Alliance of Nations, ladies and gentlemen, fellow friends. We meet again in our quest to bring peace and light into this world, but even though some of the clouds have lifted, this world has not yet escaped the darkness. The Autonomous Security Pact has rapidly expanded its influence. It is very troubling to see a democratic nation of Maricopa be threatened by these millennialist powers. I refer, of course, to the presence of Oxalian and Gitanan fleets in the Marcan Sea. They are harassing other nations and hampering international trade. Is this not an attack against world peace, an attack against the free trade nations of the world? Today, our obligations to world peace are being tested by United Katana and the millennialist bloc. If we fail to counter this threat, if we stay idle and allow them to surround us with their war machines and blockades, if the attack does not face any consequences, then this unstable peace we believe we have built will be the world's downfall. Posterity at once figured us for not stopping it. Emmerich Hagel and the other Voxlani delegates started making noise again. This time, Hagel had taken off his shoe and was banging the table with it. I have no words. The Chancellor's gone mad. Yeah, it's getting ridiculous. He's not even ashamed at his age. Despite its claims, the CSP's actions only bring about war. Yet we still believe United Katana and Arcasia, together with their allies, can come to an understanding. Our mutual benefit and our desire to avoid the destruction of the world. We believe that all the people of the world must be free to choose their own future. No country, be it Arcasia or United Katana, has the right to impose its values on others. But I will say this to the leaders of United Katana. If either of us is to be secure, we need peaceful cooperation, not defense systems, forced blockades, or shows of naval superiority. If the Alliance of Nations cannot find a resolution to this conflict, the ATO remains ready and able to react. Hagel stood up with his shoe in his hand. Alright, what is that supposed to mean? You're promoting war in the Alliance of Nations? Mr. President, this cannot... Nine slammed the gavel down and shouted, "Silence, please." Mr. Chancellor, please let me finish. We did not interrupt you when you addressed the Assembly. Finally, I propose the Alliance of Nations undertake a noble cause helping people in the world through rewriting and properly enforcing its Human Rights Declaration. The Alliance of Nations cannot survive as a static organization. Its size and needs increasing enormously. It should adapt to the changing world. But peace and rights do not rest in the hands of this organization alone. They rely on the hearts of our people and the spirit of cooperation between our nations. So let it be known, my fellow inhabitants of this world, let us take our stand and see if we can finally achieve lasting peace. Thank you. Most of the assembly applauded his speech, the ATO delegates in particular. That speech had very dangerous connotations to it.
Yes, I hope we won't be seeing a direct war between superpowers anytime soon. That would be the destruction of the planet.
The applause continued for some time. Walker shook hands with various delegates on his way back to his seat. President Nines announced the last speaker before the break. It was Leon Mileniev. Mileniev slowly walked to the rostrum in his iconic suit. All of the CSP delegates stood up and applauded him. Honorable Chairman and fellow delegates to the Alliance of Nations, here we are again at the most esteemed meeting of state representatives in the world. However, increasingly, we're being threatened, disregarded, attacked, or ignored in this assembly. Representative Arkazi has just shown his unfriendly attitude toward us yet again. Arkazi would have you believe we are standing in the way of lasting peace, yet the peace they talk about was only possible thanks to our missiles and our growing base in the developing world. The ATO kept waging wars against people's revolutions, forcing new independent states to be their puppets, binding them to themselves through the Arkazian leader. Now yet another Arkazian president is telling us that we are the aggressors and they are the keepers of peace. We are not to be silent anymore against these lies. When was the peace you talk about? When was this cooperation between our countries? Have you ever accepted our invitation to talk about denuclearization? If you don't like us, don't accept our deals, don't listen to our concerns, keep pointing fingers at us, why did you invite us to the Alliance of Nations? Every year, United Cantana comes to this assembly to address the real problems of real people. People who suffer because of your systems, your wars, and your ignorance. Whether you like it or not, we'll keep representing the laborers, the slaves, the oppressed of this world, and believe it or disregard it, history is on our side. We say to the representatives of capitalist countries, come and visit us, come and see the revolution working in Cantana. Show our continent to your people without distorting reality. If you cannot do that, then you need not come. We believe socialism will triumph over capitalism in the end. Such is the logical conclusion of the development of humankind. This time, lesbian delegates started laughing very loudly. Some other delegates booed. Ridiculous.
Yeah, millennia are very laughing.
Just a bit of both.
You can keep laughing, gentlemen. Communism will bury you.
Suddenly, the laughing turned into shouting.
If you really believe in cooperation, we will be waiting. We're not going anywhere. However, if the ATO keeps intervening in our matters, it is natural that the CSP would react. Despite threats from the ATO, Rumberg, and any other nation or organization, we must not succumb to further division and violence. We must ask ourselves, what do the people of our countries expect of us? They surely don't want war and bloodshed. So let us leave to our children and grandchildren good memories of our time and a better future for all. Let them look at history and say, once there were great divisions, complex problems, but the leaders of the world came together in the Alliance of Nations, succeeded in settling them in order to ensure our peaceful lives. Let us act in such a way to make this session not a session of threats, but a session of hopes, and the realization of them. The governments of United Cantana and the United Peoples of Cantana are ready to serve their duties for world peace. Long live the People's Revolution.
That actually wasn't a bad speech.
I'm just very concerned about the rising tensions between them and Arkazi.
The assembly broke into massive applause. The applause continued for some time. Mileniev slowly walked back to his seat as the president announced a break.
That was a lot.
Dude, no kidding. Let's grab some lunch.
Yeah, lead the way.
We walked out of the hall to have some lunch and fresh air. Nice. Alright, well, that was a really long section. And I think that's honestly as good a place to end the call for right now. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see y'all next time.